Lake Thunderbird stretched out before them, its surface calm and reflecting the rays of the setting sun. Michael Johnson sat at the bow of the boat, sipping beer from a bottle and gazing at the water. It was a warm June evening, and the air smelled of cut grass and lilies. Somewhere in the distance, seagulls cried, breaking the silence. Lorraine, his wife, sat in the middle of the boat, nervously fingering the hem of her summer dress. Her dark skin glistened in the rays of the setting sun. She tried to appear relaxed, but Michael noticed how she kept exchanging glances with Derek, who was rowing at the stern. Derek Walters, Michael's best friend from college, at least until recently. A strong man with broad shoulders and a serious gaze, who was now too focused on rowing to be natural. Michael took another sip of beer, pretending not to notice their glances. For the past few weeks, he had suspected that something was going on between Lorraine and Derek. Casual touches, lingering glances, unexpected disappearances, everything pointed to infidelity. And now this strange trip to the lake, which they had both insisted on. "Maybe some more beer?" Lorraine asked, reaching for the cooler bag. "Yeah, why not?" Michael replied, even though there was still beer left at the bottom of his bottle. He noticed Derek nodding to Lorraine, as if giving her a signal. Michael was a former swimmer. In college, he was one of the best in Oklahoma, even considered for the Olympic team. But a shoulder injury ended his career. However, the skills remained. He could hold his breath for 4 minutes, long enough to fool anyone. Lorraine handed him an open bottle. Michael took it, took a sip, and tasted something strange. He discreetly spat the beer back into the bottle. Something was wrong. Sleeping pills? Poison? He didn't know, but he was sure someone was trying to kill him. "Let's swim further out. The fish bite better there," Derek suggested, steering the boat towards the center of the lake. "Good idea," Michael agreed, pretending to drink his beer. His brain was working feverishly, assessing the situation. Their 6-year-old daughter, Tiffany, was at home with the nanny. Could they have planned this while their daughter was safe? The boat glided across the water, moving away from the shore. Derek rowed confidently, while Lorraine watched her watch. Michael placed the bottle on the bottom of the boat and discreetly picked up a small stone that was lying there as ballast, just in case. "It's so beautiful here," Lorraine said, looking at the horizon. "You know, I've always dreamed of seeing the sunset on the lake." "Yes, the sunset is beautiful here," Michael replied, watching her face closely. Lorraine was never a good actress. Her nervousness was betrayed by her trembling fingers and artificial smile. "Are you feeling okay, Mike?" Derek asked, stopping rowing. "You look kind of pale." "I'm a little dizzy," Michael lied, pretending to stagger. "Maybe too much beer?" Lorraine asked with feigned concern. "Probably." Michael shook his head, as if trying to pull himself together. "Yeah, I definitely had too much." He noticed Derek and Lorraine exchange quick glances. This was the beginning of their plan. Michael decided to play along. "I need to take a dip," he muttered, getting to his feet and deliberately staggering. "To cool off." "Maybe you shouldn't," Lorraine objected, without much enthusiasm. "You've been drinking. It's dangerous." "It's okay," Michael waved her off. "I'm a swimmer, remember?" He took off his t-shirt, leaving only his shorts on, and stood at the edge of the boat. The boat rocked. Derek and Lorraine looked at him with poorly concealed anticipation. "Be careful, don't tip the boat," Derek said with feigned concern. Michael nodded, then, as if losing his balance, fell into the water with a loud splash. As he went under, he noticed Derek putting his arm around Lorraine's shoulders. Underwater, Michael opened his eyes. The lake was murky, but he could see the dark outline of the boat above him. He swam to the side, underwater, using his silent swimming skills. Then he stopped, relaxed his muscles, and allowed himself to float up slowly, but not completely, just enough to catch a little air while remaining unseen. He could hear their voices above the water. "Where is he?" It was Lorraine. Her voice sounded tense. "I don't know, he should have surfaced by now," Derek replied. Maybe the medicine worked faster than we thought? Look! There, Lorraine shouted. Michael dove deeper so they wouldn't notice him. He could hear them talking and Derek rowing the boat. He held his breath and swam underwater, using the current to carry him away from the boat. Years of training had paid off. He could cover considerable distance without coming up for air. When his lungs began to burn, he carefully rose to take a breath and saw that the boat was several dozen meters away from him. Derek and Lorraine were looking in the other direction, peering into the water. He couldn't have drowned so quickly, he heard Lorraine's voice. We have to find him. Maybe he choked on his medication, Derek replied. Look harder. Michael realized his plan was working. They believed he had drowned or was drowning. He dove back in and swam toward the opposite shore, using the current to his advantage. When he finally reached shallow water, he was already far from the scene of the accident. Michael carefully made his way ashore into the reeds, where no one could see him. He was exhausted, but determined. After catching his breath, he made his way through the bushes to a small hill that overlooked the lake. The boat with Lorraine and Derek was still circling the spot where he had drowned. He could see them nervously scanning the water. Then Derek took out his phone and appeared to dial a number. Police. Soon, rescuers would be here to search for his body. Michael knew he didn't have much time. He had to disappear before the shoreline was cordoned off. Hiding behind trees and bushes, he walked around the lake, heading toward the nearest town. He was wearing only wet shorts, but that was the least of his problems. A plan was forming in his head as he walked. When he heard police sirens and saw flashing lights on the road to the lake, he knew time was running out. He made it to a parking lot next to a fishing store. There were a few cars there, fishermen who had spent the evening on the lake. Michael found an open pickup truck with fishing gear in the back seat. There was an old t-shirt and baseball cap in the glove compartment. He quickly put them on and, crouching down, headed for the parking lot exit on foot, trying to look like a regular fisherman returning home. When a police car drove by with its sirens on, he pulled his baseball cap down lower and turned away. The car sped past without paying any attention to him. Michael made it to a gas station on the outskirts of town. There, he found a payphone and called his old friend Eric, who lived 3 hours away. Eric, it's Michael. I'm in trouble. Can you come pick me up? I'm at the gas station by Thunderbird Lake. His voice sounded tense but firm. Michael, what's wrong, brother? Eric's voice sounded concerned. Come yourself. I'll explain everything when we meet. It's urgent, Michael replied, looking around. Eric paused for a second. Okay, I'll be there in 3 hours. Michael hung up and went into the small shop at the gas station. There was a small TV showing the local news. He froze when he saw the footage from Thunderbird Lake and the headline at the bottom of the screen. Man believed to have drowned during evening fishing trip. The camera showed police cars, rescue workers in boats shining spotlights on the water, and Lorraine sobbing on the shore with Derek supporting her by the shoulders. Their act was flawless. Two grief-stricken people who had lost a close friend and husband. A terrible tragedy. The cashier shook his head, noticing Michael watching the news. They say the guy was drunk. I never understood why people drink on the water. Michael nodded silently, lowering his head so the cashier couldn't see his face. He bought the water and went outside, finding a dark spot behind the building to wait for Eric. Time dragged on slowly. Police cars drove past the gas station. Once, a black police car pulled up to the store, and a tall woman in a suit got out. A detective. Michael stepped deeper into the shadows. The detective entered the store and began talking to the cashier, showing him a photo. Michael realized it was his photo. She asked if the cashier had seen this man. Detective Charlene Baker was known in their small town for her persistence and keen observation skills. If anyone could suspect something was wrong with his accident, it was her. Michael lay in wait, watching as the detective left the store and looked around carefully before getting back into her car. For a moment, he thought she was looking directly at him, but then she drove away. Finally, just before midnight, Eric's old blue Ford pulled up to the gas station. Michael quickly got into the car, and they drove away. "My God, Michael, what's going on? The news said you drowned." Eric glanced at him anxiously, trying to keep his eyes on the road. "They tried to kill me, Eric," Michael said quietly, staring at the night scenery rushing by. "Lorraine and Derek. They spiked my beer and hoped I would drown." "What? That's crazy. Why would they do that?" "They're together. They have been for several months, maybe longer. And there's the insurance, $500,000 if I die." Eric whistled. "What are you going to do? Report it to the police?" Michael shook his head. "There's no evidence. It would be my word against theirs. And they've already put on a show with the grieving wife and friend. Besides, they might try again. So what then?" Michael paused, gathering his thoughts. "I'll disappear. Start a new life somewhere far away from here. What about Tiffany?" "Your daughter?" Michael clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "That's the hardest part. She's only 6. She won't understand, and she won't be able to keep such a secret. If I contact her, Lorraine will find out that I'm alive, and Tiffany could be in danger." Eric nodded in understanding. "Where will you go?" "I'm thinking Arizona. I have no one there, no connections. I'll need to change my appearance, my name. Can you help me with the paperwork?" "I have a friend, but it won't be easy or cheap." "Money is not a problem. I have a secret account that Lorraine doesn't know about. I've always been careful." They drove in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Michael looked at the starry sky through the car window, thinking about how his life had changed in a matter of hours. He had lost his family, his home, his name, everything. But he was alive and determined to return one day and restore justice. The next morning, Eric turned on the TV at the motel where they were staying. The news was still reporting on Thunderbird Lake. Rescuers were still searching for Michael's body. "According to witnesses," said the reporter, "Michael Johnson, 32, was on a boat with his wife and a friend when he decided to go for a swim. Presumably intoxicated, he drowned. The search for his body continues." The camera showed Lorraine being interviewed by Detective Baker. Tears streamed down her face as she said, "Michael was such a good man. He loved the lake. He loved to swim. I don't understand how this could have happened." Derek stood next to her, his arm around her shoulder, the perfect embodiment of support and grief. "We were best friends since college." "I can't believe he's gone." Detective Baker frowned as she listened to them. Her eyes showed doubt. "Turn it off," Michael said. He couldn't watch anymore. "What now?" Eric asked. "We need to change our appearance, get new documents, start from scratch." Over the next few days, Michael transformed himself. He shaved his curly hair, grew a beard, and started wearing plain-framed glasses. Eric contacted an acquaintance who, for a hefty sum, provided Michael with a new passport, driver's license, and social security number in the name of Marcus James. A week later, he was in Phoenix, Arizona, renting a small apartment and preparing to start a new life. He got a job as a swimming coach at a local sports club, a job he was familiar with, and that didn't require too much paperwork or background checks. In the evenings, he would sit on the balcony of his new apartment, watching the sunset and thinking about Tiffany. He missed her every minute, but he knew that returning now would be too dangerous. He had to disappear so that one day he could return and protect his daughter. "I'll be back, Tiffany," he whispered, looking at the photo of his daughter that he had kept before fleeing. "I promise." Meanwhile, in Oklahoma, Detective Charlene Baker sat at her desk, studying the reports on the incident at Thunderbird Lake. Something about the story bothered her. Michael Johnson was an experienced swimmer. How could he have drowned? And why hadn't his body been found yet? She opened the folder containing information about Michael's insurance policy, $500,000 in the event of his death. A large sum, and the beneficiary was his wife, Lorraine. Baker leaned back in her chair, thinking. "Something's not right here," she muttered. But without a body, without evidence, there was nothing she could do, at least for now. Phoenix, Arizona, greeted Marcus James, formerly Michael Johnson, with blazing sun and dry air. Life in the desert was very different from the humid climate of Oklahoma, but it helped him feel like he was truly in another world. A new reality, without a past, without family, without betrayal. A small apartment in the eastern part of the city became his home. The furnishings were minimalist: a sofa, a table, a bed, and a few shelves with books. There were no photographs on the walls, except for one hidden in a desk drawer, a picture of 6-year-old Tiffany on her last birthday, which he had attended. At the Golden Sands Sports Club, Marcus quickly gained a reputation as an excellent swimming coach. His students achieved impressive results, some even competing in regional competitions. His colleagues respected him for his professionalism, but considered him unsociable. No one knew about his past. No one knew his real name. "Marcus, would you like to join us on Friday?" "We're meeting at the bar on 4th Avenue, Janet, a colleague from the fitness department, would often ask. "Sorry, I have plans for the weekend," he would invariably reply. These plans were always the same. A trip to the state border for a few hours, where he would create anonymous profiles in a small internet cafe and search for information about his daughter and ex-wife. During the first year of this life, Michael lost weight and his hair began to turn gray prematurely. His eyes, which had previously sparkled with energy, became serious and wary. He found Lorraine's page on social media. Without adding her as a friend, he could see her public photos. 7 months after his death, she updated her status to engaged. 5 months later, wedding photos with Derek appeared. The image of the grieving widow quickly faded. In the first year of his disappearance, Michael decided to take a risky step, to secretly visit his hometown in Oklahoma. Changing his appearance, wearing dark glasses and a cap, he watched his former home from a distance. He saw Tiffany playing in the yard under the supervision of a nanny. She had grown up, but he would have recognized her anywhere. Lorraine and Derek looked happy. They bought a new car with the insurance money. That same year, they renovated the house that had once belonged to Michael. Over the years, his visits became more frequent. Every 3 or 4 months, Michael would take time off work and drive to Oklahoma. He would stay in a motel on the outskirts of town, rent a car, and watch his daughter's life from afar. He saw her start school, a proud first grader with a huge backpack on her shoulders. He watched her first performance in the school choir. Once he even risked attending an open school concert, sitting in the back row. The internet became his window into Tiffany's life. When she turned 10, she got her first social media account. Michael created a fake profile under the name Marcus Reed and became one of her first friends. She accepted all requests without hesitation. "Hi," he wrote once, but immediately deleted the message. Too risky. Instead, he silently watched as she posted children's drawings, photos with friends, and stories about school events. In the 3rd year of his new life, photos of bottles of wine began to appear on Lorraine's page, then stronger drinks. Her friends joked about her drinking in the comments. At first it was harmless, but then there were hints of concern. "Lorraine, maybe that's enough. 3rd day in a row? Girl, you need to slow down. Tiffany needs a sober mom." Derek had changed too. From bits of information on social media, Michael learned that he was having problems at work. The construction company where he was a manager had downsized. Derek started drinking with Lorraine. When Tiffany turned 13, her social media posts changed. Cheerful messages and bright photos were replaced by gloomy quotes and black and white images. She began posting fewer photos with Lorraine and Derek. They no longer appeared at school events. One day, Michael noticed a new post by Tiffany. It was a typical selfie in the school bathroom, but something about it bothered him. Looking closely, he noticed a faint bruise on the girl's neck, which she was trying to hide with the high collar of her sweater. In the comments, a friend asked, "What happened to your neck?" Tiffany replied, Nothing special, I accidentally bumped it. Michael felt a growing sense of unease. He continued to study her profile and noticed several more similar, accidental injuries over the past few months. Too many coincidences. That same evening, he decided to resume his visits to Oklahoma. With each passing year, he became more cautious, changing cars, staying at different motels, never getting too close to the house or school. However, his concern for his daughter outweighed his fear of being discovered. On his next visit, he noticed that the house, once well kept and tidy, had begun to fall into disrepair. The paint on the porch was peeling, and empty bottles littered the yard. One evening, he heard a loud argument coming from the open windows. Derek was shouting and something broke. Lorraine was sobbing. Michael sat in the rental car, gripping the steering wheel, fighting the urge to rush into the house and protect his family. But he knew that would hurt them all. He was legally dead. His sudden appearance would raise questions that could lead to charges against him as well, for faking his death and evading responsibility. When Tiffany turned 15, Michael began to notice even more disturbing signs. She lost weight and became withdrawn. Her posts began to hint at depression and hopelessness. Once she wrote, "Sometimes I think it would be easier to just disappear. No one would even notice." This message frightened Michael the most. He realized that the situation was critical and he could no longer remain in the shadows. After 10 years of living under a false name, it was time to return and protect his daughter. He handed in his resignation at the Golden Sands Club. The director was surprised and upset, offering him a promotion, but Michael was adamant. "Family circumstances," he explained. "I need to go home." "I didn't know you had a family, Marcus," the director said in surprise. "I do," Michael replied quietly. "And she needs me." He packed his few belongings into 2 bags, gave up his apartment, and left Phoenix without looking back. For 10 years, this city had been his refuge, but never his home. Back in Oklahoma, Michael rented a small house on the outskirts of town, not far from Thunderbird Lake. The bedroom window overlooked the very spot on the lake where Derek and Lorraine had tried to kill him 10 years ago. Sometimes at night, he would look out at the dark water, remembering the evening that changed everything. Michael knew he couldn't just show up at the doorstep and announce himself. He had to proceed with caution. First, he decided to gather evidence of Tiffany's abuse. To do this, he began documenting everything he saw, photographing bruises, recording the dates of incidents, saving screenshots of disturbing social media posts. He also began to observe their daily life more closely. He discovered that Lorraine hardly ever left the house, except for rare trips to the liquor store. Derek worked part-time at a construction site, often skipping shifts. Tiffany spent most of her time at school or at the public library, apparently trying to spend less time at home. Michael decided he needed allies. He remembered Detective Charlene Baker, who had investigated his drowning. She didn't believe the accident story, but couldn't find any evidence. Perhaps, 10 years later, she was still working for the police. Careful inquiries around town confirmed his suspicions. Baker was now a lieutenant in the homicide division. Michael knew that meeting with her was inevitable if he wanted to get justice, but he decided to put it off until he had gathered enough evidence against Derek. One evening, watching the house from a safe distance, Michael saw Tiffany return from school later than usual. She was carrying a folder with some papers and looked excited. As she climbed the porch steps, Derek came out of the house. Even from a distance, it was clear that he was drunk. Michael couldn't hear their conversation, but he saw Tiffany excitedly showing her stepfather something. He took the papers, glanced through them, and started yelling. Then he crumpled the sheet and threw it on the ground. The girl's face changed. Joy turned to fear and disappointment. Derek continued to shout, waving his arms. Tiffany stood with her head down. Then she bent down to pick up the crumpled paper, and at that moment, Derek roughly grabbed her arm, pulling so hard that the girl cried out in pain. Michael felt the blood rush to his face with anger. He gripped the steering wheel of the car he was sitting in more tightly, fighting the urge to jump out and intervene. But he knew it wasn't time yet. He had to act deliberately to truly protect Tiffany. Derek continued to hold the girl by the arm, shouting in her face. Then he pushed her toward the door of the house with such force that she stumbled and almost fell. When they disappeared into the house, Michael was still sitting in the car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Enough," he whispered. "This has to stop." Michael took out his phone and took a few pictures of the house, turned up the collar of his jacket, and got out of the car. He approached cautiously, trying not to attract the attention of the neighbors. On the ground by the porch, he saw a crumpled piece of paper, the one Derek had thrown away. Picking it up, Michael carefully smoothed it out and read it. It was a letter from a prestigious music school offering Tiffany a scholarship for her outstanding achievements in piano playing. "Your daughter shows exceptional talent," the letter said. Michael folded the paper and hid it in his pocket. Yet another proof that Derek didn't care about Tiffany's future. Screams and sounds of blows came from the house. Michael clenched his fists, feeling determination growing inside him. For 10 years he had lived in silence and shadow, watching from afar as his daughter suffered. For 10 years he had waited for the right moment to return. That moment had come. Returning to his car, Michael looked at the house once more. Shadows flitted behind the curtains, and the sounds of the argument had died down. He took out his phone and dialed a number. "County Sheriff's Office, how can I help you?" A woman's voice answered. "Good evening," Michael said, changing his voice. "I'd like to know if Lieutenant Charlene Baker still works for you." "Yes, Lieutenant Baker is in charge of the homicide division. Would you like to leave a message?" "No, thank you," Michael replied. "I'll contact her personally." He hung up and started the car. Tomorrow he would meet with Detective Baker and tell her the whole truth about what had happened 10 years ago, and then together they would rescue Tiffany from Derek and Lorraine. Michael took one last look at the house where he had once been happy with his family. Now that house had become a prison for his daughter, and it was time to free her. Michael stood in front of the familiar door that he once opened with his own key. Now he didn't have a key, but he had determination, steel, unshakable determination. He took a deep breath and pressed the doorbell. The same melodic sound rang out as it had 10 years ago. Footsteps could be heard behind the door. Heavy, uneven steps. Derek. Michael straightened up, preparing for the upcoming encounter. The door swung open, and Derek Walters appeared on the threshold, visibly aged, with a wrinkled face and a budding beer belly. For a second, his eyes flashed with irritation at the stranger who had disturbed his evening peace. Then his gaze focused on Michael's face. The irritation turned to bewilderment, then disbelief, and finally, pure horror. He turned pale, as if he had actually seen a ghost. "It's impossible," Derek muttered barely audibly. You drowned." "As you can see, I didn't drown," Michael replied calmly. "Will you invite me in? Or shall we talk on the doorstep?" Derek backed into the house, unable to take his eyes off the resurrected dead man. Michael followed him in, closing the door behind him. The house smelled of alcohol and dust, smells that had never been there before. "Derek!" "Who's there?" Lorraine's voice came from the living room. She appeared in the hallway, gaunt, with dull eyes and premature wrinkles. In her hand was her usual glass of wine. When she saw Michael, she froze. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the wooden floor. The red liquid spread like blood. "Michael?" she whispered, as if afraid to say the name aloud. "My God! Michael?" "Hello, Lorraine," he said calmly. "Long time no see?" Her gaze darted between Michael and Derek, who was still standing frozen in shock. "But how? You drowned. We tried to kill me?" Michael finished for her. "Yes, I know. But as you can see, it didn't work. I've always been a good swimmer, remember?" At that moment, Light footsteps could be heard on the stairs. Tiffany was coming down, attracted by the unusual sounds. "Mom? What's going on?" She stopped halfway down the stairs when she saw the stranger. Michael turned and looked at his daughter. The 16-year-old girl with the wary gaze bore little resemblance to the 6-year-old sunny creature he had left 10 years ago. But her eyes, his eyes, remained the same. "Tiffany," he said with a warmth that made his voice tremble slightly. "Who are you?" she asked, looking from the stranger to her mother, then to her stepfather. "What's going on?" Lorraine was the first to recover. "Tiffany, go to your room," she ordered. "No," Michael said firmly. "She has a right to know the truth." "Tiffany, my name is Michael Johnson. I'm your father." The girl frowned. "My father died when I was 6. He drowned in a lake." "That's what you were told," Michael replied gently. "But the truth is much more complicated." Lorraine suddenly rushed to the phone. "I'm calling the police." "You're crazy." Michael didn't stop her. "Great idea. I'm sure Detective Baker will be happy to see me." At the mention of that name, Lorraine froze. Derek, finally coming out of his stupor, spoke up. "What do you want, Michael?" "Money? We'll give you everything. Just go away." "I'm not here for money," Michael replied, keeping his eyes on his daughter. "I'm here for the truth. And for Tiffany." The next morning, the city police station was unusually busy. The news of Michael Johnson's resurrection had spread quickly. Detective Charlene Baker, who had received an urgent call, couldn't hide her surprise and, strangely enough, her satisfaction when she saw the man whose death she had investigated 10 years ago. "Mr. Johnson," she said as she entered the interrogation room where Michael was waiting. "I must say you look great for a drowned man." Michael smiled weakly. "Thank you, Detective. You look good too." Baker sat down across from him, placing the 10-year-old case file on the table. "I never believed you were dead," she said bluntly. "There were too many inconsistencies. But there was no evidence. Now I want to hear the truth." Michael told her everything, about his suspicions about Lorraine and Derek, about the strange taste of beer on the lake, about how he held his breath and swam to the other side of the lake, about his new life in Arizona. "Why did you come back now?" Baker asked, taking notes. "Because of Tiffany," Michael replied. "I've been following her on social media all these years. Recently, I noticed some alarming signs, bruises, gloomy posts. I came several times and watched from a distance. Derek is abusive, and Lorraine is an alcoholic and does nothing." Baker nodded. "We've had reports from neighbors about noise in their house. The school psychologist has also expressed concern. But every time Tiffany denied there was a problem, and without her testimony, there was nothing we could do." "Now I'm here," Michael said, "and I'm ready to reopen a 10-year-old attempted murder case." Baker looked at him with respect. "It won't be easy. A lot of time has passed, and there's little evidence. But if Tiffany confirms the abuse, and if Lorraine confesses, we'll have a chance." Michael nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." That same day, Baker questioned Lorraine and Derek separately. Lorraine, who at first categorically denied any involvement in the attempted murder, gradually began to get confused in her testimony. Derek, on the other hand, remained steadfast, insisting that Michael had gotten drunk and drowned himself, and that his miraculous resurrection was nothing more than a cunning plan to extort money. Tiffany was in the social worker's office. Her whole life had been turned upside down in one night. The father she thought was dead was alive, and her mother and stepfather were suspected of attempted murder. "Can I talk to her?" Michael asked Baker. The detective hesitated. "This is a difficult situation, Mr. Johnson. Legally, you are still considered dead. Besides, you are a stranger to Tiffany." "I'm her father," Michael said quietly. "Perhaps, but that needs to be confirmed with a DNA test. More importantly, she needs time to come to terms with this." Michael knew Baker was right. He couldn't expect Tiffany to accept him right away. 10 years was too long a time. 3 days later, the DNA test confirmed Michael's paternity. Baker also obtained a search warrant for Lorraine and Derek's home, where she found evidence of abuse. Photos of Tiffany's bruises taken by Derek and Lorraine's diary, with entries about problems with her daughter. Tiffany was temporarily placed in foster care. Michael was able to talk to her for the first time in the presence of a social worker. "You look like the photos," Tiffany said, studying his face intently. "But I don't remember you. I hardly remember you." "You were very young," Michael replied. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you all these years. Why didn't you come back sooner?" Her voice sounded hurt, and she made no attempt to hide it. Michael sighed. "I was afraid." "That's no excuse, but it's the truth. I was afraid that if I came back, Derek and your mother would try to kill me again, and that would put you in danger." Tiffany was silent, thinking about his words. "Did they really try to kill you?" she finally asked. "Yes," Michael replied simply. "I hope your mother finds the courage to admit it." After this meeting, Lorraine, learning about the evidence found and the DNA test, broke down. In the presence of her lawyer, she confessed, yes, she and Derek had planned Michael's murder. They had slipped sleeping pills into his beer, hoping he would drown. When he disappeared under the water, they were sure the plan had worked. "We didn't check," she said through tears. "We just called the police and said he was drunk, decided to go swimming and drowned." Derek was furious when he learned of Lorraine's confession. He was arrested and charged with attempted murder and child abuse. However, he was not going to give up so easily. From prison, he contacted his brother, Malcolm Walters, a man of questionable reputation with connections in the criminal world. Malcolm was supposed to take care of Michael, this time for good. Baker, sensing danger, offered Michael protection, but he refused. Instead, he suggested using himself as bait to catch Derek organizing a new assassination attempt. "It's too risky," Baker objected. "It's the only way to put him behind bars for a long time," Michael replied. "Otherwise, he could be out in a few years for good behavior. And then Tiffany will never be safe." Baker reluctantly agreed to the plan. The police set up surveillance on Michael and his temporary residence. All of Derek's conversations from prison were recorded. Meanwhile, Michael and Tiffany's relationship slowly improved. She began to ask questions about his life before, how he and Lorraine met, what her first birthday was like. Michael answered patiently, realizing that the girl was trying to piece together the scattered fragments of her story into a coherent picture. One day, Tiffany asked, "Have you really been watching me all these years?" "Yes," Michael replied. "I was at your first school concert, sitting in the back row. I saw you win the swimming competition in 4th grade." "I didn't know you were a swimmer," Tiffany said. "One of the best in the state in my day," Michael replied with a smile. "That's what saved my life back then at the lake." One evening, as Michael was returning home, he noticed an unfamiliar car parked nearby. Inside sat a man who looked like Derek. Michael immediately realized it was Malcolm, Derek's brother. He pretended not to notice and went into the house. Then he contacted Baker on a secure line. "He's here," Michael reported. "The plan is working." "Be careful," Baker replied. "Our people are nearby, but don't take any unnecessary risks." At 2 in the morning, Michael heard someone breaking down the back door. He was ready. Hidden cameras had been installed in the house, and Michael himself was wearing a bulletproof vest under his shirt, a suggestion from Baker that he had reluctantly agreed to. Malcolm Walters entered the bedroom holding a gun with a silencer. Michael pretended to be asleep. Malcolm took aim, but at that moment, the police burst into the room. A struggle ensued and a shot rang out. The bullet grazed Michael's shoulder, but the bulletproof vest saved him from serious injury. Malcolm was arrested on the spot. Under the weight of evidence, recordings of conversations with Derek, testimony from cellmates, surveillance camera footage, He confessed that his brother had hired him to kill Michael in exchange for a large sum of money hidden in one of his accounts. After this incident, the case against Derek became indisputable. He was charged with organizing the murder, attempted murder 10 years ago, and child abuse. Lorraine, in exchange for her confession and testimony against Derek, received a lighter sentence, but also went to prison. Tiffany, upon learning of Derek's attempt to kill her real father again, turned her back on her stepfather for good. She began the process of rebuilding her relationship with Michael. Legally, Michael Johnson's resurrection proved to be a complicated process. It took a lot of paperwork, testimony, and court hearings to annul the death certificate and restore his rights. But Detective Baker helped at every stage, gathering the necessary evidence and testimony. 6 months later, the court handed down its verdict. Derek received 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Lorraine received 8 years with the possibility of parole after 5. Michael officially gained custody of Tiffany. They moved to a new house far away from Thunderbird Lake and the dark memories associated with it. "I like it here," Tiffany said, looking around her new room. "But I still can't call you Dad." "Not yet." "I understand," Michael replied. "Call me Michael." "We'll take our time." Gradually, they began to rebuild their relationship. Michael resumed his career as a swimming coach at the local sports center. Tiffany, freed from Derek's cruel control, blossomed. She returned to the music lessons he had forbidden and even began attending the pool where Michael worked. "Would you like me to teach you how to hold your breath underwater?" Michael asked one day, smiling. "It's a family talent." Tiffany smiled back. For the first time in a long time, her smile was genuine. "Yes, I'd like to learn that." One evening, after a particularly successful training session, as they were returning home, Tiffany suddenly took Michael's hand. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I remember one thing from my childhood. How you taught me to swim. You said, 'Don't be afraid of the water. It's your friend if you respect its power.' I always remembered that, even when I thought you were dead." Michael squeezed her hand tighter, unable to speak because of the emotions that flooded him. "Thank you for coming back," Tiffany said simply. They approached the house, and Michael opened the door. Ahead of them lay a new life, without lies, without fear, without decades of silence between them. A life in which the truth, however bitter, became the foundation for a new, honest relationship. "Thank you for waiting," Michael replied, and they entered the house together. Detective Baker, watching the scene from her car parked nearby, smiled. Her last unsolved case had finally come to a conclusion, not the one she had expected, but a much more just one. She started the car and drove away, leaving father and daughter alone with their new beginning. Michael Johnson, the man who once faked his own death to save himself, had now truly come back to life. A real life, full of new opportunities and restored relationships. 10 years of silence had ended, and now it was possible to start talking about the future,